You can be forgiven for thinking that the family and having children doesn't matter as much as it used to. Many of us define our lives through our work, and if we do have children, I can't help but notice that we're told that teachers can bring up our children better, inform their values and guide their way, and that the government knows best, and that parents are a minor inconvenience in moulding the thoughts, values and morals of a young person. You can even think that you haven't got much of a connection with your family anymore. That is, until you tell them that you're expecting to have a child. And the eldest person in our family, at 92 years old, having heard the news, was now waiting patiently to meet the newest, youngest member. When you enter that period of your life, then you do feel that things have hugely changed when it comes to your thoughts about family, friends, and what's important to you and the people that are important to you in your life. And that definitely happened to us, Emily and I, when we were told that Ted, our little baby, wasn't very well very soon after he was born. So this is the story of what happened to us over the last 6 weeks. Today, your baby is going to be born, I think. So look back on this day, mate. It's a lovely day. Springtime, birds are out, stupid pigeons in the tree, blossoms up and about up there. I recorded this little memory video outside whilst Emily's contractions got stronger and stronger and closer together. I remember looking up at the sky and looking at the trees and thinking, what an amazing day to have a child. By now, Ted was well over a week late, and we decided to jump in the car and drive to our hospital. We didn't have that frantic drive to the hospital that you see in the movies. Everything was kind of normal, exactly how you'd expect. Emily in a lot of pain one point, and then relaxed again a few moments later. We parked directly outside the Rosie Maternity Hospital and Birth Centre, and we were fortunate enough to be given an actual birth centre room with a lovely big bath, should Emily want to do a water birth. Everything went really quite quickly from there. I was, you bring loads of food with you and everything, thinking this is going to be a 30-hour saga. It wasn't that at all. Emily had the baby in 20 minutes. And a lot of other nurses and midwives came in and were like, blimey, that is a world record. So Ted, our little Theodore, came out after 20 minutes, and I was just over the moon, the feelings that you have seeing that sort of thing happen. Max, who's holding the camera now, you've been there and done that, haven't you, mate? And you know exactly how it feels. It's just an amazing kind of surreal moment where, as a husband, all you can really do is sort of help a bit, beat the horn sometimes, that sort of thing, to try and help it all move along. It was during the England-Ireland game, actually, the Six Nations, and I'd actually brought Ted along a little England Six Nations top to wear, and we sat and watched that game. After a while, the midwife came back in and she said, I just want to check Theodore, or Ted's SATs. He had like a thing to test his oxygen levels in his blood, and his oxygen levels are really, really low. So she tested another wrist, then she tested both his feet, and you could tell she was becoming more and more concerned. It went from that to a doctor coming down from a thing that I'd never heard of before called NICU. I've since found out it's the neonatal intensive care unit. They told us that Ted needed to be admitted to hospital right now. He needed to go to intensive care right now, and that he was quite poorly. Emily's currently being looked after by another nurse, so she couldn't come up to intensive care with me. So I had to go up with him in this special lift that they said we're not usually allowed to use to get up there, but it was quicker. And being in that lift, alone with Ted and these doctors, with him in this little box, sort of wriggling about, looking around, not knowing what's going on, was like possibly, I don't know, it was one of the bleakest moments. Ted was hooked up to all sorts of wires and monitors, and a few hours later Emily was able to join him up in NICU as well. It was really scary to watch him hooked up like that. They put him on a CPAP machine, which puts forced increased oxygenated air into his lungs. And about this time the doctors took his blood and also found out that he'd got a small infection. By about 11 o'clock that night, we'd been sat with him in NICU for hours and hours. It was at that point the nurses, realising how tired we are and knowing that they didn't have any rooms for us to stay at the hospital, informed us that we should just go home. I'm sure I don't have to tell you how hard it is to leave your child in hospital when they are under a day old. But it was what we had to do, and we knew that Ted was in great hands. As we left NICU that night, I noticed by the exit a small end of treatment bell with a poem that said, "Ring this bell 3 times well, it's told to clearly say, you helped me grow, it's time to go, so I am on my way." But the next day was the start of a routine, going in at 8 in the morning, driving up the car park, walking into the hospital, going in, washing our hands, getting signed into the ward, walking in to see Ted, sitting with Ted until 4 in the afternoon, going home, driving back in again at 6:30, sitting with Ted until 10:30 at night, going home and trying to get some sort of sleep. In between, just putting food in our mouths and trying to stay alive in this weird sort of world that didn't really kind of exist. It was just really, really strange. We were told that he would need to have a lumbar punch to test the spinal fluid, but they were testing for meningitis and a few things like that. And they said, "Oh, you don't want to be in here to see that because it's really horrible for parents to see because we have to hold them down really still and they wriggle around a lot." So off we go, this big old kind of thing that we have to get over, worrying about poor little Ted having some needle shoved into his spine. They said, "Oh, the results of that will come back in 2 days." So we now know that he's going to be in for another 2 days. In the meantime, his oxygen levels had actually got a lot better. They'd switched that down so it wasn't forced oxygen, it was atmospheric forced oxygen. So it was like 21% oxygen, which is what we are breathing now. But he was still on antibiotics every 4 hours, and his infection markers that they were taking bloods for every so often were still staying up. In fact, they'd gone up. And then at one point we were sat with him, he was being fed through a tube. It's really weird because he's laying in this little cot. Every time you picked him up, there's just like a million things hanging off him that made picking him up really unnatural and stressful. He had this tube coming out of his nose where we'd feed him through this tube with milk. And every time he did it, you'd have to pull out a little bit of milk and test the pH of it. At this one time, we pulled a bit of this stuff out of his stomach and it was green. And the nurse said, "Oh, all right, yeah, it's a bit unusual." And her professionalism really shone through because she obviously was concerned about that, but didn't say anything to us to make us worried because that would reflect with the baby because they can tell. Anyway, we go back at 8, it's raining outside, we walk into the ward. What we'd been used to walking into was Ted in his cot in this sort of section that he'd got, fast asleep generally, all the beeping and stuff like that going on. That's what we'd kind of been used to going into. What we walked into on this occasion was about another 5 or 6 doctors all around his cot. He was in an incubator again, sort of wriggling about, looking out at us through the glass. Emily burst into tears. My first thing was saying, "What's wrong? Is he all right? What's going on? Has he had like some sort of crash or whatever?" And they said that they tested this green fluid and he was basically having to go down for an x-ray and that he might have to have surgery. And they said, "Go and walk around Addenbrooke's for an hour and come back in an hour and we'll be able to tell you what's going on." It was one of the most bleakest hours of our lives because Emily and I walked around Addenbrooke's Hospital, this huge sort of monolith style. It was hammering down with rain and we were just walking around, basically both of us crying our eyes out, thinking, when are we going to get this? I mean, when's he going to get better? Is he going to get better? We're starting to think, what is going on here? We get back in an hour, and Emily had said to me, she said, "I want you to look through the door before she looks in." And that was actually something we'd used for his remaining time in hospital. I'd looked through the door first because we didn't want to walk into that situation again. I looked in through the door and he was there asleep in his cot, and we walked in and the nurse said, "He's been discharged by the surgeons. It's completely fine. It's probably just minor sort of green fluid left over from when he was born because they have quite a lot of that in them."
Hello, Teddy. Ooh. I'm your daddy, Teddy.
Yeah, you're stuck with me.
And Mummy.
After 7 days, we were told that Ted was finally well enough to come home.
Go on then, go for it.
It's not the best ring ever, but it's 3 times.
Do you like that, Teddy?
Chocolate.
I'd spoken to other parents with poorly children in NICU, and some had been there for months, and I was thankful that Ted was strong enough and well enough to come out after only just a week, and that the constant churn of poorly infants at the most vulnerable point in their lives never stops in NICU. The amazing feeling of ringing up your family and friends and telling them that he's well enough to come home, and then finally taking him out to the car in his little carrier and strapping him in for that small journey that would be the start of the rest of his life, words really cannot describe. The most fun thing in life is actually to live for someone else, and effectively that's what you're doing when you have a child. It's one thing going on holiday all the time, and Emily and I love doing that. The most fun thing, and the thing you realise, is that it's really fun living for someone else. It's not hassle. It's actually one of the most fulfilling things you can do. Finally our families get to meet Ted. Finally they get to cuddle him and look at him and hear his little weird chutchy noises that he makes. And finally, having kept up to date with all the news about his birth and his admission to hospital and the week that he was in intensive care, my Nana Rini, who'd waited patiently for him in her home, finally got the opportunity to meet him. We also took a photo of the 4 generations of our family on my mother's side. Truly one I think I'll cherish. Thank you to all the nurses and doctors in NICU at Addenbrooke's Hospital, and especially big thank you to Charlotte, who made us feel comfortable on the ward and also confident that they could make him better again. I would strongly recommend that you search for the NICU ward in your local hospital, to which you can donate to if you feel you want to. And for now, Emily and I are just going to get on with some parenting. Morning everybody. Are you happy boy? Are you happy boy?
No.
Oh, you're being very smiley this morning, aren't you? Are you happy, Teddy? Teddy! Oh no,
I've seen
you're
that.
thinking about doing a poo now.